Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Finance Panel meeting. I'm Kath Flanagan-Jones. I'm the Senior Scrutiny Officer. As this is the first Finance Panel meeting following the Council AGM, we have elections of Chair and Vice Chair to follow after the apologies. So if I can give the apologies first, and then we will run with election of Chair and Vice Chair before we get to the main papers of the day. We've received apologies from Councillor Jeremy Pugh from panel. We've received apologies from Cabinet members Councillor Jake Berriman, Councillor Jackie Charlton, Councillor Glyn Preston and Councillor Matthew Dorrance. I've received apologies from the following officers: Diane Reynolds, Ellen Sullivan, James Chappell, John Forsey, Matthew Perry, Nina Davis, Paul Bradshaw, Richard Jones and Sally Llewellyn. I'm not aware of any other apologies. If anybody's got those, please advise. No. Okay. If we can then move on to the election of the chair. I have received a nomination for Councillor Allard to be re-elected as Chair of Finance Panel. Councillor Allard, in the first instance, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, thank you, Kath.
Okay, can I please have proposer and a seconder?
I'm happy to propose, Kath.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peat.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. For those in panel, if you can please raise your hands for a vote to make sure you're in agreement. Thank you very much. Therefore, Councillor Allard Davis is elected for the ensuing year as Chair of Finance Panel. Chair, would you like me to carry on with Vice Chair, or would you like to take over?
Happy. Well, you may as well carry on for that election of Vice Chair. Thank you,
Okay,
Kath.
thank you. For Vice Chair, I've received a nomination of Councillor Pete Lewington. Again, if Councillor Pete, do you agree?
Happy to accept, Kath.
Okay, and can I have a proposer and a seconder?
Happy to propose.
Councillor Howell proposing.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Howell seconding. Thank you very much. And again, if panel members can show of hands. Thank you all very much. There we go. So Councillor Peat, you are elected as Vice Chair for the ensuing year. Chair, I'll hand over to you for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kath, and thanks to the committee as well. And we'll go straight on to item 4, declarations of interest, to receive any disclosures of interest by members relating to the items to be considered at this meeting. No. Great. Next item is item 5, the minutes from the May meeting, 13th of May, which was held by Zoom again. You've got those in front of you. Are you happy to accept that those are a true record of the meeting? Kind of proposal, please. Pete, thank you, Pete. Everybody in favour? Thank you. And we did have some recommendations for the first part of that meeting around the revenue. We did ask for the deficits on the schools going back over a few years. That has been produced. It's been produced for the learning and skills team, but it hasn't been included in this paper. It would have been useful for it to be included in the finance papers as well, if that could be addressed for a future meeting. Thank you. And item 2, it was about the clarity around the recommendation to apologies for clarity around the budget variance. I know Councillor Peat was raised this, and the response from the service is that they will review the presentation of the budget variance for future reports. So looking forward to the outcome of that. Second half of the minutes were for the capital forecast, and there weren't any recommendations to Cabinet on those papers. Any other comments on the minutes of the last meeting? No. Right, we'll go straight on to item 6, the financial outturn revenue report for 25-26 as at 31st of March 2026. This is the only quarter we see which is the actual numbers and not the estimates. So, David, do you want to give us the headline information around this?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I'll just pull out the headlines, so to speak, out of the body of the report, because presumably, obviously, all members of the committee have read the detail contained therein. So this is the revenue outturn 25-26 report. And with regard to the overall financial position, the total budget was £367.1 million. And the position at year end was an underspend of £1.2 million, which represented 0.3% of the total budget. Non-ring fence services came in at a £0.9 million underspend. And this indicates a strong financial management in what was an extremely challenging year. With regards to savings delivery, £12.4 million of savings were delivered, and that's 77% of target. £2.7 million was not achieved, and £2.5 million has been rolled forward. I think that just really emphasises the fact that savings are becoming more and more difficult to actually identify and delivered as the financial situation gets more and more challenging. The reserves position, the general reserve increased to £12.3 million, which is 4.8% of the budget. There were significant transfers into specific reserves, and the reserves were used to manage inflation and fuel risks and to support transformation and future pressures. The school's financial position, school's overall deficit amounted to £3.1 million. That was higher than planned use of reserves, and the position has worsened during the year. At a high level, looking at service performance, many services reported underspends, but that was often due to vacancies and additional income and grants coming in. I won't go into the specific service headlines. I think you've got them there. I just say the transformation, there's an ongoing programme to reduce costs and modernise our services, including restructuring and redundancies, and there have been higher than expected costs there. But at the end of the day, that's critical to future financial sustainability. There is in the report a section on capital and borrowing. I won't go into any detail on that because you're going to have the capital report immediately after this report. And there are key financial risks highlighted in the report. And the major ongoing risks are future budget gaps in the medium term, inflation and fuel cost volatility, and demand-led pressures, especially around social care. The risk budget has £3 million set aside and £2.2 million was used of that. With regard to the underspend, that was used the surplus was used to build the reserves, invest in schools improvements, cyber resilience, flooding, and service transformation. There's a section in the report which actually highlights some of the key outputs that were delivered during the year, and some of those are quite impressive. But at the end of the day, Chair, the bottom line, I suppose, is that the council delivered a small underspend despite significant financial pressures. Strong financial management and use of grants reserves supported the position. However, there are concerns and challenges around savings delivery, school deficits, and future budget pressures going forward. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my report.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Mary, would you want to comment at this stage, or are you happy to jump in at any time?
I think I'm happy to go straight to questions. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. As a group, we had a quick pre-meeting 2-3 days ago, and we looked at this paper. There have been a number of questions raised. I know, Chris, you welcomed the robust financial position of the council coming in with a small surplus, which huge organisation, and it was really well delivered. Chris, would you like to flesh that out? Thank you.
Thank you for the report and the figures. And again, the headline of a 1.2 million surplus is positive, and particularly when you start to unpack the challenges along the way. You state that that's through strong financial management. I just wondered whether you could just give a bit more context to that, of what's happening behind the scenes that give us that emphasis around strong financial management. Because it's easy to just see the headline number, but not necessarily know the detail. And I just wanted to unpick that a little bit, because as you rightfully said, Councillor David, in your there are some risks that are in the background, and it's just about getting the assurance that we are covering all bases, because you mentioned about inflation and increased demands and workforce challenges. If one of those goes amiss, then it will have an impact on our budget position overall. So it's just trying to do that. And the other question that fell out of it is, are we seeing from the savings coming through a deliverable from Sustainable Powys, or am I a little bit too early on that? And have we got greater efficiencies coming through over the longer term? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think the first thing I'd have to say is that any budget, be it from a small household budget to a major corporate budget, has to be challenging by its very, very nature. But I think it's very important to recognise from the very onset that once a budget is set, it's not static. It's a flexible beast. It has to be flexible, because all the impacts that can actually affect that budget within the 12 months before another budget is set. And I think when we talk about strong financial management, what we're talking about basically is the ability of finance officers and heads of service, etc., to manage their budgets and be able to adapt and actually incorporate some of these challenges which weren't foreseen at the time the budget was set into the actual budget process itself going forward, to help ensure that we've got a balanced budget at the year end, and indeed in this case with a very, very, very small underspend. So when I say strong financial management, that's what I'm getting at. It's the ability of our officers to actually be flexible, to understand their budgets, and where they've got challenges that weren't recognised when the budgets were set, they've actually faced up to those and accommodated those into their budgets going forward. With regard to the cost savings coming directly out of Sustainable Powys, I haven't got the detail to hand at the moment, but obviously shortly, I think it's due in September or October, something like that. We will be looking at the transformation end of year portfolio, and that will include all details with regard to the transformation programme, which incorporates the Sustainable Powys principles, and that will actually highlight any cost avoidance and savings that were actually generated within the 12 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, looking forward to seeing. I think last year was the first time that kind of report was produced, wasn't it? So looking forward to seeing this year's version. Just on the cost reduction, since this is the fourth quarter, end of year, the table 2, it still has the same headings as the in-year quarters 1, 2, and 3. Can a little bit of thought be given, like not yet achieved or assured, possibly changed to carried forward to the following financial year or something like that? Rather, just have a little bit of review in this last quarter. Comment on the balance. You know, it's good to see a surplus of 1.2 million. However, there's quite significant variation within the various elements, and that's the officer's job to try and balance off those various services. But are you, as a portfolio holder for finance, are you worried about the reliance on this one-off funding at the end of the financial year to bring us into balance? It's quite. I'm not sure what sort of level of transfers received throughout the year. but there's a significant, I think, Appendix E, I can't remember now, which shows the grants that have come in the last quarter. Appendix E, it's Appendix E. I assume those have been received in the last quarter. There's over £1 million worth of grants there. Are we, how dependent are we on these last minute grants to balance the budget?
I'm not over concerned because it's we're not reliant on them, and that's reflected actually. If you hadn't had that £1 million of grants, we'd still have come in with a very, very small underspend, and the budget would have been balanced. But you know, it wouldn't be correct in the first place to rely on those grants. But if they do materialise, obviously they're very, very welcome. But I think it's fair to say that as heads of service and finance managers are looking at the budget through the year, they're managing it, you know, period by period, and they're not actually presuming that they're going to get a heavy grant coming in at the year end. But obviously, if that were to be the case, and we were in a position where grant funding didn't come in, then we'd have to manage that in the final quarter. And if it meant that we did end up with a small overspend, then obviously we'd have to look at reserves. But no, we don't actually rely on grants coming in the final quarter to balance our budget, but they are welcome.
Yeah, thank you. The digital service grant was 900k. It's around social care. Did we know well ahead of receiving that money that grant was coming in?
I think that somebody from the service perhaps can give some indication
Perhaps
as to what the position
Sharon,
was there.
Are you able to?
Yeah, Chair. Yes, we were aware of that grant coming in advance.
So apologies, I wasn't sure who answered.
Sharon Powell, Head of Children's Services.
Apologies, Sharon Powell.
That's okay.
I could see Sharon through in on screen, but I couldn't see you. No, thank you. And I should have gone to Sandra to ask that question, really. Apologies. Thank you. Councillor Adam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good to be back on Finance Panel, and apologies I didn't make the pre-meeting. I've been asked the same question as you, which is about when reading the report, it looks like there is a vulnerability around those last-minute grants. I suppose a precursor to it, actually, so congratulations to anybody who gets a budget in at 0.3, within 0.3 of the variance. I think probably gets huge respect. So I think that all those points you make, Councillor David, I acknowledge. But in reading the report, I did take away the impression that we are more reliant on these grants than those actual final figures indicate. And I think you've answered my question, David, for this point, which was, what if they don't come? What if they don't come? Well, we effectively have an overspend, and then we have to look to reserves. And I just think that's probably a bigger factor than the actual final numbers reveal. So that was one area of saying, look, this looks and feels fragile in a couple of places. I mean, very robust overall, but and the other one was the prospective savings of adult and children's services, which I think, if I get the right table, can I find the right table now? Table 2 of cost reductions, only because in adult services and in children's services, and then a little bit in highways, transport and cycling, we're looking at both relatively big numbers and actually relatively significant percentages of achieved or missed. So it was just how exposed do you think we are to those sorts of difficulties? Because you add them up and there's £2 million in that. That feels like one of the areas of, I can say weakness, but it's probably where you've got least firm information. I wonder if you could comment on how vulnerable our budget is to those sorts of difficulties.
I think the services in question will give you the detail around those cost savings, but I would just highlight the fact that I initially started this discussion with the fact that, you know, any budget is going to be relatively fragile, and that's why we've got to manage it very, very carefully and monitor it right throughout the year. Nothing is left until the very year ends before we actually accommodate any pressures that might have developed earlier in the year. But As to the specifics around the cost savings, etc., within those services, perhaps the portfolio holders or the heads of service would like to pick those up.
Yes, can I bring in Councillor Roberts? Adult services didn't quite achieve 60% of their savings, leaving it 1.5 million short. I know you have the explanation down in Appendix D, which is good to see. Pete, would you like to comment on your area and maybe other cabinet members who've struggled to achieve all the savings could come in afterwards? Thank you.
Happy to comment. We went through this in a lot of detail at Health and Care Scrutiny when we were looking at Q3 reporting, because at that point we were highlighting that most of the savings that hadn't been achieved at that point would largely remain unachieved. So there's been a degree of scrutiny there already. Basically, you can sum up the non-delivery into really 3 areas. The extra care ones, delays at Welshpool, meant we were only able to achieve an in-year partial saving, which carries over into this year and is automatically achieved because the work has been done. So there's a couple of elements of that. The elements around the day opportunities and a number of transformations, that was delayed mid-year last year to take into account greater feedback from the community, and then that then delayed the implementation of the first phase of that, which then delayed the workforce changes. Those changes are now progressing with significant consultation and engagement with the workforce and the unions, to which we're having strong feedback on, and are now expected to deliver in the middle to end of Q2 of this financial year. So they will deliver through. And then the third type of saving is where staff were delivering savings, but also being expected to deliver in a similar sort of area within their day work, particularly on right sizing. And the reality is that they focused on the day work and new cases, getting that right first time, and actually reducing pressure on the need to draw down on the demographic aspects of the risk budget. But the consequence was they didn't deliver the in-year expected efficiencies in terms of going back and reviewing existing cases to right-size those. That's being taken account by officers, and Sharon may want to expand on this in terms of the focus of staff in this year's work, because the catch-up work on this is being prioritised and staff are being realigned to help support that.
Yeah, that was the big one in the about 900,000, which is put, and only 43% was achieved, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those tricky areas, Councillor Ali, that we could probably have hit more of the savings, but we probably would have drawn down more on the risk budget, because in not drawing down, not securing the savings, we actually avoided cost in new packages.
Oh, sorry. Can you explain that again? Delays in new packages being put into place?
We focused on cost avoidance by right sizing in line with the shift left and getting things right first time. Officers focused on ensuring new packages were delivered, so there weren't delays in people receiving dom care, potentially being delayed from hospital, potentially having to go into residential homes. And as a result, they didn't have enough time available to focus back on historic cases where they were looking to review and right-size and deliver efficiencies there.
Okay. Can I, before I bring Sharon in, can I bring Adam back in on this, and then Sharon can...
Yeah, mine's very, very quick one. So I fully acknowledge and understand the individual circumstances, and actually recognise that health and social care scrutiny is the place to do this interrogation. My finance panel question was really about is this a persistent problem because it's been around for a while. Is it something that when we're looking at the weaknesses in our budget or the fragility, is this one that persists year on year as opposed to, or is this just a one-off bad luck? Set of circumstances is my finance question as opposed to my adult social services question.
Sharon will come in a second, but my finance related response would be delivering efficiencies within social care is always fraught with we don't know what is going to come through the front door. The complexity of the care needs of the individual can significantly alter a budget line. And as a result, we are constantly working to cut that down. That's the whole basis of the transformation programme within social care. The shift left idea is to get in early to provide lower level, cheaper, more cost effective support to delay the point that an individual needs more expensive care. But until we get to that point, we've got the challenge, as you've seen here, that right-sizing first time and prioritising that means we don't go back to historic stuff. So it's a work in progress, and it's a significantly more stable position than we were 5-6 years ago. 5-6 years ago, the person would have been saying that in my post would have been saying we're in a more stable position than we were 5 or 6 years ago. It's an incremental improvement as we understand and better manage the system and the people within it.
Okay, thanks. Go on, Adam.
But only a very, very final point, which is fully acknowledging that we have a very good, robust finance management system that gets us to 0.3% of our variance. Excellent. This feels like one of those more flexible areas that we need to pay much more attention to this and the grants. So it's just a recommendation from my side that says, from what I'm reading, these 2 or 3 service areas, and that's their ability to save, plus the reliance on some grants coming through, are areas of where we should have greater observation rather than less. I know we are doing that already. I think it's a note we make for next year as well. Thank you.
My final response to that is I agree with you, which is why I've asked officers to give me much more finer detail when it comes to where we are on efficiencies and how we're making progress on a quarterly basis and hopefully soon a monthly basis.
Thank you. I'm keen to bring Sharon in on this as well. And I know a lot of the demographic growth was sort of held at risk, wasn't it? Which it does impact on the overall picture. Sharon, and can you also address, Pete did say that Health and Care Social Scrutiny Committee have already had a look on these numbers. Do you, off the top of your head, do you know what any recommendations that they brought forward from that or not? But Sharon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Adam. I think it is an area of needing robust oversight, because we only need one person with very complex needs that we can't provide for in county, and we're looking at a significant drain on the budget to be able to provide for them appropriately. So it can swing very quickly. I wanted to give assurances that over the last few years we've delivered all of our savings near enough. I think last year there was a small deficit. So this is a particular issue this year that and I think it's an indication of a lot of the work is focused on right sizing and the funding body review, and we've done a lot of that, and actually we now need to focus on that shift in left to prevention, as Councillor Pete said, and whilst maintaining the here and now as well, and addressing the needs of the here and now. So it's a difficult balance to provide assurance. We do have a dedicated resource now that's being led by a senior manager around the right sizing team. They've been given very clear parameters of where they should focus their energies, and that's being monitored. And I think the last point, Chair, you made around scrutiny, it was pretty much what the conversation we're having now. Regular, robust oversight, regular updates to scrutiny around any emerging themes and any risks. Just to reiterate, Councillor Peat has been quite prescriptive in the report that he wants from us as a service to provide that level of assurance and to highlight any risks as early as possible.
Thank you, Sharon. And from off the top of your head, you can't remember any recommendations from the scrutiny? No, probably
not without checking. Sorry, Chair. I can forward them though.
That would be brilliant if you could. No, and you mentioned the funding body review as well. It sounds as though there's not a lot more efficiencies to be gained from there in future years. No, okay, because there's always that new clientele coming through as well, which needs to be challenged at every opportunity. Thanks both, Councillor Peat.
Thanks, Chair. Mine were on some separate points, so I don't know if Councillor Chris wanted to come in on this particular point.
Were you looking at this, Chris, or something else? Because we do need.
Well, it builds on it. I mean, I agree that in order to avoid cost, you have to change the model, and the move towards a preventative model is the right approach in doing that and building community resilience along the way. And that sits into the sustainable powers agenda, which we're pursuing on there. But I do agree, you only need one or two complex cases and it can throw things all out of line. I just want to get the assurance on there. I probably know the answer that you're going to be giving, but you do work closely with the local health board in order to address these very complex cases along the way. And I just want to get an assurance that that is happening in the communication with the relevant teams there. My other question, though, stems into this because I was looking at the grants table that is in here and in Appendix E, and there is some RIFT funding that is in there, which is quite substantial funding that comes in, and that's in its third year in the commentary that's on there. So by 2029-30, that funding as it looks here would stop, and I just want to get an assurance, how is that being managed through the team for what happens at year 5, and what are the consequences if that funding doesn't come back in, or have I read that completely wrong and that's something completely different? But it does again mention the health board on there. So I just wanted to get that unpacked a little bit on there, because the consequence of not having 2.8 would be quite significant, I would thought.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for highlighting that. Sharon and Councillor Peat play an incredibly important role in over the next few months with the plans of the LHP as they emerge. It's important to have strong input there. Sharon, would you like to comment on Chris's points, including the potential ending of the RIFT funding in 2 or 3 years' time? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go back to Councillor Chris, your first point around joint working with the health board around people with complex needs. Absolutely fundamental part of our work. We've got several forums where we can work closely together routinely around transition planning. Obviously, you know, there's areas where we have professional differences, but those are worked through with the person kept in clear sight of what's best for them. We've been doing a lot of work recently around our standard operating procedures around continuing healthcare, and there's a series of joint workshops that we're attending to look at particular areas where that has been quite fraught with the application of the CHC framework, and we're the aim of those workshops is to have a robust standard operating procedure that would apply across both organisations. So there's lots of multidisciplinary work going ahead. We're both cited on both of our transformation programmes, and we're working at getting better in that continuing healthcare arena. Hope that answers that part of your question, Councillor Chris. Regarding the RIF, yes, the RIF money is due to come to an end after next year, and we're sort of assured there will be a replacement, but we don't know what that will look like and how much it will be. So there's been a lot of work undertaken over the last 6-8 months where we've been reviewing the programmes that are within that funding, prioritising those programmes where there would be a large impact on outcomes, looking to core fund and base fund programmes where we can, which is right and proper to do so. But a significant amount of the funding is around the RPB team as well. And if there is no, the RIF team, sorry, and if there is no RIF, then we would be addressing those funding losses through our normal HR processes, through redeployment, etc. So lots of work being done around prioritisation, understanding the impact, baseline funding where possible, and planning for the replacement of RIF.
Thank you, Sharon. Peter, do you want to comment on this, or we need to move on?
Just a small addition on both. In respect to continuing healthcare, we've also not been backward in coming forward on identifying potential national changes. And early at the back end of last month, I wrote to the new health minister outlining 3 changes around continuing healthcare that would need Welsh Government intervention that could smooth the process forward. The idea of replicating the English process of a pot of money that can be used whilst the apportionment is identified between the health board and the local authority to free up a placement, coming forward with common practices across the whole of Wales, so that when you're working within the environment, you haven't got local changes. They're the 2 major ones that could have some really positive impacts on patients. In respect of RIF, I sit as one of the vice chairs on the Regional Partnership Board. Officers work on the executive, and we work in a similar sort of way to scrutiny and cabinet. As a board, we've been pushing very hard to officers to work on the 0 funding from April next year. What is the outcome? So that all projects are being evaluated. They're either being mainstreamed, looking for additional funding, or looking to bring those projects to an end, which, as well as being the right thing to do so that they are actually identified as on costs, it will hopefully free up resources for new and innovative work within the successor fund to RIF, rather than having a legacy of backfilling finance. And then Sharon has outlined the process beyond that when decisions are made.
Good. My wish would be for all these grants to be put into the base funding, but hey, I don't think that will happen.
The advantage of having a RIF is it allows us to work across the 3 sectors on innovation, on developing things that would never be in the base funding. But it has ended up with things being funded that probably should have been transitioned out. So I'll disagree with you on that one. I don't think it would be an advantage. I think it would stifle innovation and stifle the ability for us to deliver better services.
I always think grants are an inefficient way of transferring funding into the local authority, but we can argue about that at another date. Councillor Pete Lewington.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I am a patient man. I can see Sharon's also been very patient. She had her hand up there. I didn't know.
Oh, sorry.
Still wanted to come in on this one.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just come in from a children's services point of view, that just to reiterate the same kind of information and narrative that Sharon has provided, but for children's services, in terms of going back to Councillor Chris's point about Powers Teaching Health Board, we have a panel that works really well in terms of joint funding around elements such as continuing care, which is very different to continuing healthcare for adults. So just to provide that assurance to the panel, that process works really well in terms of that arena. And then coming on to the RIF funding, we have an Edge of Care service that is fully funded by the RIF funding. So Councillor Chris is quite right to raise that as a risk. It is currently noted as a risk. And as Sharon says, funding is coming, but we don't absolutely know what the eligibility criteria for that funding is. So we are taking a review of that service to see whether we need a new model, whether actually that could be brought into the base budget. So just to give that assurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And I'm sure you'll keep the Health and Care Scrutiny Committee up to speed on any changes in the future. Thank you, Pete, for giving Sharon a chance to put her words in. Back to you, though, Pete. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't. Chris had his hand up again there. I didn't know whether Chris still wanted to come in. So, I'll get there at the end. Just call me Yo-Yo.
Just briefly, I'd just be grateful to have a list of those particular projects that potentially could be at risk, just so that we have an understanding of what those would look like. Not now, but if the teams could just let us know what those are, I think it would be helpful. And I can pick up in health scrutiny then accordingly. Thank you.
That's no problem, Chair. In terms of that, we can get that to you, Councillor Chris. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. It'd be good for councillors in general to get a idea of those various services as well. Councillor Peat, thanks for your patience.
Absolutely, no problem at all, Chair. No problem. I just had 2 or 3 points on some different topics actually. In the report, paragraph 2.4. which is on page 22 of the pack, it talks about the cost pressures from the conflict in the Middle East. And I just wondered if there are any plans to deal with those cost pressures, apart from using the risk budget and reserves. So, for example, have we sort of listed the pressures and thought of actions to mitigate them? And I guess one of the obvious ones might be to use less fuel. So do we have any mitigation plans around that? If I may, second point was on page 23 and table 1. And I was just struggling to understand the mathematics of the third column, the variance under and over, the actual spend and the variance and under and overspend. Sorry, struggling to talk today. So we have a subtotal of 530. We then bring in 325 relating to annual transfers to reserves. Then we gives us a total underspend of 855. Then we have a couple of lines on the housing revenue account and schools delegated of 692, which brings us to the total of the 1.222 million. But I can't understand how the annual transfers to reserves come into that figure, because the 1.2 million looks like it's just the 530 plus the 692. And then just 2 final points, if I may, Chair. I think the first one's probably been picked up on earlier from Councillor Chris and Councillor David, which was around the paragraphs on the transformation. Because I was going to ask to see a summary of the services transformed, sort of setting out what the transformation is, and whether we could also have a summary of changes to the way the services are being delivered. But I think if I understood Councillor David's response correctly, we will be seeing a report in September time. So just want to check my understanding there. And then finally, Chair, it relates to all the appendices, and a common theme I saw sort of running throughout those for the reasons for the savings was delay in recruiting to vacant posts. So I guess what I'm not seeing on the other side of the coin is what, if any, impact there was on the delivery of services, because I guess it just begs the question that if there was no impact, were the vacancies really needed in the first place if we can still deliver the service with a lower level of staff? And I wondered how that's been evaluated and brought into. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lewington. If I knew you were going to make so many points, I would have taken notes. But can I come to Councillor David first?
Yeah, I'll
take up the relevant points you can, and then anything not answered, Pete, can you please come back? Thank you.
Yeah, with the Middle East situation and the impact of what's developing there, you'll recall that at the end of February report, where we had a significant underspend there, we did transfer a lot of that underspend into specific reserves, and we did actually cover a lot of the cost of the increase in fuel arising from the immediate increase that developed when the price of oil, etc., shot up. But going forward again, we built our specific reserves to a level that it will offer some protection. But I think the biggest threats at the moment are going to be around interest rates and inflation. The Bank of England has managed to keep interest rates at 3.75, but my guess that's simply because there's no growth in the economy and the unemployment figures. But my guess is that that is going to move eventually. But I think Andrew Bailey was suggesting that might be the case at year end at 3.75, which will be good news. But there's no way that they can hold that back if we do then see an increase in inflation, which the bank is forecasting could reach 4% by the year end, and indeed some economists are suggesting it could go as high as 4.5%. Were that to happen, I think they're going to have to slow the economy, the spend within the economy down slightly, and that in turn is going to put pressure on interest rates again. But as I say, we are in a fairly strong position. We have built up our specific reserves. The general fund reserve is sitting in a good position. And again, it's one of these things that will impact budgets going forward. And we just have to look for that flexibility within the budget to allow us to manage it. And we might have to make unplanned savings in other areas. I just want to make some general comments around some of the earlier concerns around the savings delivery. I think when you're setting a budget, the only thing that's actually set in stone is your starting figure. Once you've got that, you set your budget and you move forward, there's going to be all sorts of impacts. And I think, as I did say, savings delivery is going to be one of the most difficult because of the challenges we face with and because of reducing budgets. And despite assurances at the time we set the budgets, you're going to see some of these savings are going to be impacted. And the discipline that we apply then, as we always have, is we say to our heads of service that they look elsewhere to deliver a similar amount of savings. And in the case of adult social care in particular, they did come in at the year end with an underspend, but that applies to all services, Chair. So that's the Middle East situation. I'm feeling fairly comfortable that we've addressed that one as best we can at the moment. The one on the transformation, yes, you will get a lot of information with regard to sustainable powers and the transformation, because basically the transformation program is sustainable powers, and that's what's delivering our savings going forward. What were the other ones?
The table, table one.
Oh, table one. Mary, could you pick that one up?
Mary, good afternoon, Mary.
Good afternoon. Yes, of course. Thank you. Yes, looking at table one, getting back to it now. Sorry. So the reserves really are those transfers happen regardless, really. I suppose of our overall position. They don't require firemen, so that's why they're set out separately. But yes, the overall total in terms of the underspend is the 530 and the 692, which is the 1.2 million then. So the reserves, the transfers to ring-fenced reserves are there for information really, because they don't need to be in the environment part of the report.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you lost me, Mary. I don't know if everybody else understood, and it was just me. But Pete, come on.
Yeah, just pick up a couple of things there, if I may, Chair. Yeah, I just wonder then, hearing what you said there, Mary, is whether they might be better as some sort of footnote or something to that table rather than actually being shown in the column and confusing things. The Middle East bit, yes, if I've understood Councillor David correctly, their main problem is interest rates and inflation, and obviously we're in the hands of others to deal with that. So thank you for that explanation. Yeah, happy with the sustainable Paris answer as well. The only other one that was left, and sorry, I know I did reel off quite a few questions there, was just the overarching one about when you look in the appendices, a lot of the services are saying a common reason for their savings is the delay in recruiting to the vacant posts. So I was just trying to understand what, if any, impact there had been on delivering those services where those folk weren't in place. And then really asking, I guess, the $64 million question, which is if there was no impact on delivering services, were those posts really needed in the first place? And how is that evaluated and measured and decided?
Yeah, I think your final comment there, I'd certainly agree with that. If a service is trying to run with reduced resource over a long period, then I think it does become questionable as to whether that resource is required. But I think, it's fair to say that any service can run for a short period, perhaps in some cases a more prolonged period, with a reduced resource and still manage to deliver close to the optimum that they're required to deliver. But it's a valid point. If you're running for a long period with unnecessary resource, then it begs the question why it should be there. Perhaps Jane would like to comment more on this.
If I may, Chair, and I hope you can hear me. I've got a fan blasting here, so if it is disrupting the noise, I can turn it off.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
I think it's worth noting as well, we review the outturn position every year. So as part of the budget work that we're already developing through corporate leadership team, and then that will obviously move on to further audiences as we move, we will look at variances, including those around staff slippage across the organisation, to just see if there are any opportunities that haven't already been captured in those future year budgets, because I'm sure as councillors, you would all rather see the easy things to do rather than have to make really proposals that can impact more significantly on service delivery. So we will be reviewing all of those variances to understand them well and see if there are opportunities to build in for the future.
Thank you, Jane. I'm glad you talked about easy savings. I'm not sure exactly what those are. Just a couple of quick questions. I'll come back to you very soon, Arwell. On table one, that's the suggestion of Pete that those two lines could be taken out. But their school delegated shows a surplus of 271. But the overall level of indebtedness of these schools has gone up. How can those two things be balanced off? I could see James. Sorry, I should have addressed you directly, Councillor James, with your responsibility to schools. At the bottom of table one, the school's delegated budget shows a surplus. However, the overall level of debt has risen within the schools. Thank you. James, you're muted, I think.
My apologies. Sincere apologies. It's a good question, and I think maybe, officers will have to help me here, but I think part of the answers maybe lies is that the school deficit position, and I'm not in any way glossing over the seriousness of it, because we've had a long discussion about this at Learning and Skills, as you recall, and you know how concerned I am about that. But there's been a lot of drawdown from reserves by primary schools. Would that mean that they haven't spent as much of their delegated budget as they might have done? Is that the explanation? Can Marianne help here? I can't think of another explanation. It's a good point. It doesn't seem to make sense, does it? It's counterintuitive.
Yeah, Marianne, unless a delegated budget wasn't actually fully delegated and someone's held back.
Yeah, so the situation has increased in the primary sector, hasn't it? So and this is where some primary schools have been able to have decrease their surplus positions, because there were quite a lot of surplus budgets in the primary sector in particular, and then some other primary schools weren't able to set a balanced budget by the end of year. So that's why there's been an increase there. Just to say as well, we've received all schools' spending plans now for this next year. So we've just received those at the beginning of last week, and the team will be looking at those forensically now going forward and working with the schools to support and challenge them to improve their deficit positions. Okay.
Sorry, Marianne. This in this table, it's a net position for the whole of the school's delegated budget. And the whole of the school's delegated budget went further into the red in this financial year than it.
Okay, I'll need to look into that. Which table were you on? Sorry.
Table 1, revenue outturn,
okay.
25-26.
Leave that with me. I'll come back to you now. Okay.
Okay, and while I'm on this subject of schools delegated, the reserves table does have a net position. I would much rather have 2 lines there of the actual deficit level and the actual reserve level. I know the bottom line would remain the same, but it would show the level of risk within the school delegated. But I've asked for that many times, but it never gets done. But that's your prerogative. Councillor Arwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Now, just coming on to the reserves again, really. Obviously, it's pleasing to see that a net position of about £9 million reserves, but have they come from underspend, and will they be called upon in the future?
David, 9 million, which figure is?
Well, on table 3, the total revenue reserves has gone up from 65 to 73.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the change. Okay, yeah, 8.9 million. Yeah, sorry, Arwell, I misunderstood.
Yeah,
David.
Yeah, a lot of those are ring-fenced reserves and specific reserves, and the general fund reserve, obviously. Well, it all comes back, Harold, I think, to budget management, doesn't it? And I think this is what we were saying at the start, that if we don't manage our budget properly and we do end up at the year end with significant overspends in areas, that's the fallback position. It's highly probable that we would have to use more than we normally would out of specific reserves, and that's what they're there for. It's a guarantee to protect us if we do end up in an overspend position. And indeed, the general fund reserve, well, technically that's there for a rainy day and a complete disaster. You know, hopefully we never have to touch that. But the specific reserves, you know, that they set up to offer that additional bit of protection.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say, like, well, for say example, the transport fund, you know, there's an extra 2 million gone into it this year. Is it because that we haven't bought equipment this year and it's been put into reserves and it'll come out next year?
We'll see some of that in the capital spend, won't we, Councillor David?
Yes, yeah. As I say, is there anybody here from transport? I was thinking maybe more specific on that.
Yeah, sorry, Jackie. Councillor Jackie Charlton, who has a responsibility for HDR. Thank you, Jackie.
Sorry, Councillor Aled, my attention was taken then. Can you repeat the question?
Arwell.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, on table 3 now, on transport and equipment fund, it was 12.5 million reserves. We've added another 2 million, just over 2 million this year, so going up to 14.5 million. But is it because that we haven't bought equipment for this year and then that's been put into reserve, but will there be a call on it next year?
Could well be. I don't know the actual details of that extra transfer, Councillor Arwell. I don't know whether there's any officers on the call who will be able to give me that background information. But yes, we keep a general reserve of around about 12 million every year because there is always a call for vehicle purchases and it's a rolling programme. So the reserves are always kept like that, but I can't tell you the exact details of that.
I know we'll get to the detail in the capital report, but I know I can see Jane's hand going up. So, Jane.
Thank you.
I think I can hopefully answer a couple of questions. So in terms of school reserves, table 1 is showing the variance against the planned budget for schools. So where they plan to draw or put into reserves, that isn't captured in that variance. It is only the difference against what was planned as opposed to what actually happened. So that's why that table shows that figure rather than what you see in the reserves table that shows you the balances. With regard to the other reserves, Transport and Equipment Fund, there is a standard transfer every year to that transport reserve that meets those requirements going forward. But I'm sure you'll appreciate how we then draw down from that reserve can vary depending on the needs of the service in any one year and the vehicles that they need to replace at that point in time. So that will be the net impact of transfers to or from reserves in that respect. In terms of reserves as well, there's usually a very big transfer to reserves that is around grants and applied. So where we've received grants, but they haven't necessarily been applied to our accounts in a specific year, that can be quite a substantial amount that we have to put into reserve and then draw the following year. So there are a number of things that can really impact on that net position in terms of the actual transfer. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Yeah, so it is giving us a bit of a false sense of security, maybe. Okay, thank you.
And the same can be said about the schools delegated as well. Thank you for that explanation. In a way, you could say that these schools planned to spend £1 million more than they had to spend, but they only overspent by £70,000 instead, and then that shows up as a surplus of 270k on, which is not, well, I don't know. Some thought needs to be given to how that is presented.
That's why you've got both sets of figures. So you see the variance to the budget, but you also see the actual reserve balances.
Yes. Okay. Perhaps I'm not a qualified accountant to pick up all those nuances. And thank you. And I don't think the portfolio holder was either. And he missed out on that as well. James, to be fair, I'll come back to you. Your hand is up.
No, I wasn't actually going to address that, but there are other issues. I have to go shortly, so I just wanted to make a point. You've highlighted a point around table 1, which, you know, it's the vagaries and mysteries of local government finance and how that's presented. But that table, to me, is very unusual in that it's got a overspend in the corporate activities line, which actually is historically extremely unusual, and actually makes coming out with a balanced budget even more slightly extraordinary, because in past years, in my experience, and I can't remember a year when we didn't actually manage to balance the budget by underspending in the corporate activities line. And now we've done it by, even when we've significantly overspent. I don't know, I mean, don't know whether Jane wants to outline what the overspends were, and this may be not the place to do it, but I just think that's quite remarkable. And I just thought I couldn't miss this opportunity to make that point.
No, really good point. We did bring it up in the pre-meeting, and we haven't almost over it. But no, thank you for drawing attention to that. I noticed you're just raising your right hand only.
Yes, well, nothing to do with local government finance. It's horses are very dangerous at both ends.
Okay, speedy recovery, James. Jane or Mary, the corporate finance underspend, is it to do with the holding budgets at risk?
Yes, the risk budget, I think, Chair, but Mary can confirm that now.
Yes, so yes, this is related to the risk budget, and also the transfers to reserves earlier in the year as well, which was part of that. It also, this is where we reflect the redundancy costs that we need to address as well. I think it's some of that explanation is there in Appendix A, where we go through it in a bit more detail. There's also elements around the provision for bad debts, and also the costs of collection for rates and council tax as well. So it's a combination of things, but mainly around that transfer to specific reserves in the previous report.
a question springs to mind. Apart from why is it particularly unusual in this particular year? Is there some other factors or not? Because there's always been a certain amount of spend held at risk and transfers during the year. Is there some additional explanation? It's nothing to do with the potential of the 75% premium support or not?
No, that would have been part of it, because we did put some provision aside for potentially not getting all of that in. So that would be part of it over the whole year. But we did allocate quite often over the last couple of years. The risk budget hasn't been utilised as much, whereas we did allocate more of the risk budget in this financial year just gone in 25-26. So that was part of it as well.
Okay, the substantial part of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether I could just have a bit of further explanation, because we've been looking at the outturn position up until the March 26. But when I look at the table in Appendix C, which is looking at the risk budget, there is a series of environments that come through, and no problem with those. But what I have is a date column on there, and we've got some items of environment which are coming in this financial year. And I just wondered whether that's a confusion, and does it lead to a different perspective? Because if you tot up everything that's come in from the 19th to the 5th, 26, we come to around about 4.7 million. And I just wondered whether that was supposed to be here, or is it just a table that people have added in and it's just gone in on block? But does that alter the position? I just seek clarification, please.
Yes, we did find that a little bit confusing until we realised what was going on in the meeting. Councillor David.
I'll pass that one over to Mary if I may, Chair.
So the dates reflect the timing when the reports were considered by Cabinet.
Yeah.
So that's when the environments were actually finally agreed.
But we don't have a date of when they came in, or it happened, or does it only happen when Cabinet does it? Therefore, it's in this financial year, not in the previous financial year.
But they all relate to 25-26.
Okay. I just think that there needs to be a little bit of commentary to explain that, because to me, it raised questions, hence why I've raised it today. Thank you.
Yeah, so that they are taken into account at year end of 25-26, even though those decisions are delayed until the next financial year.
Yes, it was particularly delayed this year because of the pre-election period.
Pre-election,
the report didn't come to Cabinet.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, because it's only the top. From first glance, it looks as though it's just the top 5 which are relevant to this report. But thank you. As Chris suggested, a little bit of commentary would help. Councillor Winton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to finish off on the staff vacancy point that I think Councillor David there was agreeing around the validity of the long-term vacancies in that respect. So I didn't know if we've got any data on how long vacancies have been outstanding. If so, what do we do with it? And if not, I wonder if we should consider introducing such a report and perhaps include some comments in the head of service commentaries that come in the appendices.
Councillor David, or do we have somebody from HR?
Yeah, I obviously don't have that data. I don't know if it's available. I don't know if Jane can throw any light on that, but I guess we need an answer from somebody in HR.
Jane.
Should I come in? So
Please.
each service will have that data, and operationally they will review that. And as I indicated earlier, we will be looking at that as the corporate leadership team to understand where that is. It's a nuanced position, isn't it? There will be different reasons in different services as to why those vacancies have been held, or just an inability to recruit to those vacancies. You may have some additional costs elsewhere in terms of agency or whatever as well that offset some of that. So I think in terms of doing a detailed report across the whole organisation, without a heck of a lot of context, you probably wouldn't get that real flavour. But I think the work that we will do across services and as the corporate leadership team will help us get underneath that. And as I said, that may well inform some of the opportunities that will be able to be taken in future year budgets. So just to give you assurance, really, that we are looking at that in detail.
Yeah, I get that. Sorry if I made Chair. Yeah, no, I get that. Thanks, Jane. I understand the nuance bits around it as well.
Yeah.
I suppose where I was trying to drive at, and yeah, I'm not looking to create an industry of reporting by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, I suppose what I was trying to get towards is the way you look at it, trying to think, oh, we need to look at different ways to try and fill this position. Or do you also look at the fact we haven't filled this position for 9 or 12 months and we've done okay, so we're going to stop it?
Yeah, absolutely. We do look at both
Brilliant.
aspects.
Okay. Thank you for that assurance.
And I'm sure the fact that some posts are funded by grants and those grants
That
are
will have an
possibly
impact.
coming to an end also impacts grant. As I was saying, funding through grants does make that long-term vision slightly more difficult. But Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My comments relate to Appendix B, key areas of activity delivered. And I take considerable comfort from what Councillor David said about having a detailed report coming in the not too distant future on the outputs of transformation and the embedding of sustainable powers. And I think there could be lessons to be learned when we see that paper, because Appendix B, as it's currently formulated, some of it is just a list of activities. So what? We've got 66 primary schools. But what has the money spent on those primary schools done in terms of improved pupil performance, attendance, or whatever? I contrast that with adult services, where you can see from the figures quoted there that this shift to the left to more preventative activities is reaping dividends. So to take the learning of this in future years, I'd like to see Appendix B, which is not just a bold list of activities, because activities are only meaningful when you look at the outputs and outcomes that they deliver. So if we could have that, particularly with the more effort that's been put into the integrated business planning, where there should, from this year onwards, be more detailed outputs. They're far better formulated, they're increasingly monitored, and we'll be able to see what the activities actually achieve. So that sort of refinement, as well as looking at this over time. So if you could build up a profile year on year, you could see which way the improved outputs in terms of transformation, streamlining, smarter ways of working and procurement are actually impacting. And maybe that explanation, which Councillor David hinted at, ongoing transformation, sustainable powers, whatever, working in partnership, stopping doing things, if that could be put in a commentary box against each of these headline activities and the outputs over a period, I think that would be very meaningful.
Thank you, Gareth. Would anybody like to comment? It's about trends and what if and the impacts. Maybe who would like to respond to that? Maybe, just like on the casual swimming participation, 250,000 people. Well, 250,000 swims, I assume, not 250,000 people. But if that had a red arrow pointing up or pointing down, or a blue arrow pointing up or down, blue's good, red's bad. So it become a bit more tricky if you say primary schools, 66 primary schools, and you've got arrowed down saying, and that being blue. Some people might find it exception. You probably have to have a neutral color as well. But
that they of themselves, Chair, aren't an activity, are they?
Sorry?
Just listing the number of primary schools isn't an activity which is delivered.
No.
Nor is the kilometres of roads we've got, or the number of street lamps.
Very, very.
Maybe
very
the numbers of potholes that are filled and the lights that are working is a different thing.
Yes, but the transformation program is to reduce the number of empty places and more than likely reduce the number of schools as well. So whether it's in line with the council's transformation. I'm sorry, Jane, I should have leave you come.
Thank you if you let me come in, because you're absolutely spot on, Gareth, in terms of that request, and we've done a lot of work with services to really be able to demonstrate that impact, because we're underselling ourselves in terms of what we actually deliver across the council, and the impact that has for our residents is really important, and we need to be better able to demonstrate it. So each service does go through a self-assessment, and the self-assessment report that is pulled together across the organisation is better able to tease that out. So I wouldn't say that we need to replicate that here, but it's definitely a feature in terms of that self-assessment. And we do hope that that will give you a lot more information about that impact. But it's a really important point. And as I said, we need to be far better at being able to demonstrate that to our residents and to yourselves in terms of the scrutiny role.
Oh, thanks very much for that's music to my ears, Jane. Thanks.
Mary. Oh, yeah. Did you want to add to Jane's?
Jane's pretty much said what I was going to say. There is that self-assessment report on its way through. We're also working with our colleagues to try and align the reporting better, but obviously there's limits to what we can do and what there's capacity for in any one meeting as well. So, but we are looking at aligning that better. But I'm happy to take those comments on board and look again at what this is meant to be a snapshot of what we've done. But like you say, there should be more around the impact as well in there. So we can certainly take that on board for next year.
Thanks.
Diolch, Mary. Pete.
Thanks, Chair. 2 questions on Appendix A, if I may, please. I'm on page 32, the Heads of Service commentary, and first question's on the HTR one there. In the first paragraph, on the second sentence, it talks about the positive movement was driven by a combination of factors, one of which was tighter expenditure control. And I just wondered what that actually meant, and if we did have control weaknesses before that have now been addressed. And then the last line in that paragraph talks about the improvement being welcome, but it does reflect the need for more ambitious income forecasting. And I just wondered again what more ambitious income forecasting meant. Would it mean increased car parking charges, for example? And the last point is on page 40, the corporate services commentary, and that talks about an overspend which is primarily resulted from insurance excesses being higher than forecast. And I just wondered what that actually meant. I assume it relates to the insurances on air policies, but I don't know if it means we've had a lot of claims and we therefore had to pay a lot of the excesses. So I was just after a bit of clarity on that one, please.
Thank you, Pete. Can I bring Councillor Jackie Charlton in, portfolio holder for HTR? Jackie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've just found the two paragraphs that Councillor Peat was alluding to. I believe you asking about the first paragraph for 25-26 outturn, reflecting the continued financial pressures across HTR. And it actually does suggest that what we've done is we have tightened up on our expenditure control, and there has been better than expected income in several budget headings. One of those being the 1.2 million that went into the floor of the budget to cover things like ditching and gullying and that work, because that would have come in that year. So I think actually, Councillor Peat, from what I'm reading in that and my understanding of what we've been doing in HTR, we have actually been tightening up on expenditure, but when there's been the opportunity to put money into the budget, which there was with the 1.2 million, we've actually put in those places where we know there's been extra pressures and we couldn't find the money from elsewhere. So I hope that gives you an answer on that one. And then if you could just direct me to the second question as well.
Yeah. Can we just step in and examine Pete's first question, really? So to the residents out there, when HTR is saying they've spent £98,000 less than they budgeted for, what does that mean? £98,000 worth of pothole repairs, or some?
No, no, it wouldn't have been that. I mean, obviously, anything that we put into the budget that we say we're going to spend on potholes and highways maintenance, we will do unless there have been pressures from other areas. And like every service, and I think that was explained earlier to you in this committee, that we can't always budget for everything. We can only, and I think it was Councillor David who said, the only actual certainty that we have in a budget is that first figure on the first day. There's lots of movements in and out of that. So I can't give you the chapter and verse on the 98,000. That was in 25-26, Councillor Peter. My memory doesn't go back that far, especially in this heat, as much as I would like to try. But I can say that I think, yeah, carry on.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Jack. Yeah, so just before you move on, I was just trying to really understand what tighter expenditure control meant. So does that mean in tough times we're not spending as much?
No.
Does it mean we're spending more wisely, or does it mean we've got a problem with our controls over expenses?
I think we're spending more wisely, and I think we are taking more control over that. So that is my understanding of that, and I think you would agree that when we see problems in HTR, we do deal with it fairly quickly. So where environments are needed, they're dealt with quickly, and I've been assured in lots of different areas as well that we do a particularly good job on that one to make sure that our budgets are balanced. So I'm quite content that that's a good demonstration of where we are on that. I know you alluded to car parking again, Councillor Peat. I'm not quite sure what you meant by that, because we're not increasing car parking charges other than by inflation. So we're not going out there and looking for an increase in car parking charges over and above inflation.
Yeah,
Pete, do you want to read out that line again?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor Jackie. Yeah, it's just a little bit further on that line. I wasn't alluding to you increasing car parking charges.
I know you just love saying car parking.
I was just throwing that in as an example. It's just on that next line there, that same paragraph, Councillor Jackie. It uses the phrase ambitious income forecasting, and I just wanted to understand what that means.
Yes, I think there's all kinds of areas in HTR where we have an income, and I think what we try and do is be as fair as we possibly can. It's not about increasing costs to residents, but it is about being very, very clear about what charges we make. As you probably know, we do undertake most of the trunk roads agencies work on our trunk roads in Powys, so our service actually delivers for them. We get a very good income from that. And I think that's probably where we are at our most ambitious, and that is being very clear about what we're charging, what we can deliver, and doing the best that we possibly can, because it's a very, very high income generation area of HTR, and it does provide us with a lot of support in other areas, including supporting our potholes as well.
Just very quickly, Pete's second point was around the insurance premiums.
Sorry?
claims. Is that related to HER, or shall I go to Mary on that?
Can you just say that again? Because you sort of slightly overlapped each other then, and I didn't hear what you were saying. Something to do with premiums?
I just find
sorry, Chair. Sorry, Jackie.
Page 40.
It's on page 40. The heading's corporate services finance.
Right. Okay. So it's not me then.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Thanks then.
Mary.
Shall I come in on that one? So we do have specific insurance policies in place, and as with anybody's insurance policy, there's an excess that we pay for the first part of the claim, and we operate an insurance reserve around that as well to help smooth that over the year. So basically what we're saying there is that, and as you probably can expect, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult area to forecast, knowing when these cases are going to come to an end and decisions be made on it. So in February we were forecasting a certain position, and then at the end of the year we were it came out about 216,000, sort of worse than that really in terms of the forecast. So that was showing then as an overspend, because we budgeted based on the February position, and then we had that come through then in March and picked that up. So, but it is all smooth as it mentions there from the specific insurance reserve that we hold exactly for that purpose, really.
Thank you, Mary. Just a quick question to Councillor David. Do the various categories of claims and stuff get fed through to the Cabinet? Part of the risk assessment about various services, if one of the services is seeing a high level of claims, is that sort of information fed through to the Cabinet or any scrutiny committees?
No, I'm not aware that it is. No.
Has there been significant change from what Mary was saying? It does sound there's been additional claims within that financial year.
I'm not. Jane's coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it's really an operational issue in terms of insurance. So we wouldn't want to go into specific details about specific claims, because they can be across all services for obvious reasons. The corporate leadership team do receive a report, and actually we take it to the senior leadership team, so heads of service are there as well. So we have a routine report that goes in there that looks at which insurance claims have materialised. We look for trends, we look for patterns, and we look to address anything if we believe there's a particular area of focus. We would raise things with Cabinet more widely and with relevant portfolio holders as we need to, but there's no further reporting than that at this stage, unless of course it would be something that we needed to raise the profile on and have more scrutiny.
But it does sound like there's been a significant increase, or something wasn't quite right with the forecasting.
It's not about that. It's, some of those claims could be quite significant. They could be injuries, they could be children's services claims, there could be anything. So obviously it depends when those are actually concluded. You only need one larger one to hit, or a property claim even, because we do carry quite high excesses, but that keeps the premiums down, and that's exactly why we've got the reserve there to manage it. So it can vary quite significantly between the years, hence the need to hold that reserve to smooth that out, as Mary's already indicated.
I do understand that, and I wouldn't be interested in individual claims, but it's just the trends and which services. But maybe we can take that discussion outside. Right. Thank you, Jane. We've spent too much time on revenue. Any quick other questions on revenue? We've only got half an hour for capital. No. Right. We'll go straight over to capital. Next item.
Chair, can I just come in? Are there any recommendations from panel on the revenue before you proceed to the capital outturn?
I know you've been taking notes, Kath. Could you run through
in the chat, in our chat?
I've
sent you a Teams message.
Oh, okay. Yes, the Cabinet ensures this could potential recommendations, I don't know what the committee thinks, that the Cabinet ensures quarterly monitoring reports to Finance Panel, including detailed updates on delivery of savings within adult social care and children's services and other high-risk areas. I'm guessing we're getting that to some extent already, Kath, within quarterly outturns. So I guess
that was the only possible recommendation that may have come out. The rest are all notes for officers to come back with information that panel members have requested. So I've made a note of those, and we'll put those as actions in the minutes.
Okay. I did make the point around the headings in the quarter four. Also, the splitting of surpluses and deficits within schools in the reserves table. And Pete also made that comment on taking those two lines out of table one to make it more clearer to these are public documents. It's important that they're accessible and understandable even by councillors, if that's possible. Any others, committee? I know, Chris, you brought out a couple of important points. Just trying to look back through my notes. Is Crystal?
Yeah, I mean, I raised about the potential services that are going to be impacted through the loss of the RIF fund. And I also suggested about some commentary if it's going over, but whether that's just technical, because I hadn't taken into consideration the pre-election period, which would then account for that being the case. But
a lot of our comments are about presentation and making sure the quarter reports are easily understood as a public documents, really.
Yes, Chair, I've got a note about the RIF for officers to provide further detail. So they're officer actions rather than recommendations to Cabinet.
Okay. Too subtle for me, Kath. Thank you. Right, David, can you give us a few headings out of the year end for the capital report? Thank you.
Yes, I'll do that, Chair. Thank you. So this is the capital outturn report 25-26. I've just drawn out the headlines as best I can. So the original programme was £86.8 million and the revised budget was £83.3 million. The actual spend was £63.2 million. Excuse me. Around £20 million slipped into future years, and this was mainly due to reprofiling. 24% of the budget was not spent in year, and that's largely due to the reprofiling, and this was reflected in delays in timing, supply chain and delivery schedules. These are not generally due to project failure, and there are no major delivery concerns overall. The main areas of spend, the largest areas of spend were HTR, housing and education. The major projects delivered were new council house developments, 32 new homes in Newtown. School modernisation schemes are progressing. And there was investment in roads, bridges, transport, leisure and care facilities and regeneration, for example, the Montgomery Canal. With regard to reprofiling into 26-27, 16.9 million was carried forward into next year. And the largest reprofiling was applied to highways at £8.3 million and education at £3.3 million. The programme was funded in the main by grants, borrowing and revenue contributions. And the borrowing position is that we borrowed £16.05 million, which was 25% of spend. Strong performance in the housing programme and continued investments in existing housing stock quality standard improvements. The highway programme is on track overall. And the education programme, multiple major school projects are progressing and 148 improvement schemes are at various stages. Regeneration and economy, there was investment in levelling up fund projects, town centre regeneration, £4 million there, and public infrastructure and green energy. With regard to risks, we've obviously got risks there, and the key risks are inflation, and we've already discussed that to some degree, particularly fuel and supply chain pressures, and again, the impact of the global conflict on costs and borrowing. With regard to capital receipts, £1.52 million was received, which is lower than expected, and the delays were due to failed sales and changes to disposal strategy. So I think to summarise the report, what it's saying is that the council delivered significant capital investment, £63 million. The underspend's mainly timing related, not performance related. Strong delivery in housing, infrastructure and regeneration. However, future pressures with regard to inflation and borrowing costs remain key risks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. Panel, we went through this very quickly at pre-meeting. Chris, you had a question around the remaining budget, the unspent budget. Would you like to ask a question on that, please?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I was looking at in some years that we don't spend all of the capital that's allocated. I think in this report it's around 76%. And then I asked the question is, what happens to the remaining capital? Does that get carried forward? Because if we were taking this over a 5-year term and we were only spending 76% or whatever the figure is, if it's not the full allocation over a 5-year term, we potentially could have missed a whole year's spend on capital. And I just wanted to get an explanation regarding that and to see how that's taken forward. My other question that falls out is around, obviously, we've always had an allocation for capital spend through the capital receipts, and I just wondered whether the change in the farm estate policy now coming through, does that alter that position, and does that lead us to any additional risks to be aware of, or does that now resolve things, and are we going to lower the expectations around the capital receipts that we're going to be bringing in? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. David.
Right. Well, as the report states, actual spend was 76%. The budget, 24% of the budget is not spent in year, and that's due in the main to reprofiling of projects. And it's not generally due to project failures. With regard to the capital receipts and the new county farms estate policy, there is going to be some impact. I don't think it's major, but certainly I think one of the conditions there was that if there is a capital receipt, that part of the borrowing costs that are offset, whatever figure that represents, there's a part of that will be reinvested into the estate to try and maintain their income targets. But apart from that, I don't think there's going to be any other major impact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Capital is an incredibly important part, and we never give it enough attention. It's so important to help delivery of the your sustainable powers program. Can I just quickly pick up on the table within this report? Sometimes bear little resemblance to the initial budget reports when setting the budgets, and from between years, between different budgets, there's such variation, and it's difficult to track what's happening to various projects across that. For example, in not the budget from February, but the February before, in 26-27, 21st century schools, you're supposed to be spending total school spend about 56 million pounds. But in the same year, in this year's budget, it's down to 35 million pounds. And it's difficult to understand what's happening to the various projects across powers and tracing. And is there anything we can do to help the explanation of what's happening to those various projects? Oh, I'm sorry. Can I bring Lynn in? Lynn's chair of audit and governance and audit. Apologies, Lynn, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allard. Thanks, Chair, and thank you for inviting and enabling me to speak in my capacity as an observer to your meeting. I just wanted to share with you that the points that you've just raised were also raised by Governance and Audit Committee at their seminar on the annual governance statement and the council self-assessment, and during the Governance and Audit Committee's formal consideration of those documents a couple of weeks ago. Just to note that Governance and Audit Committee have expressed the same views as you did. So, you know, power to your elbow in seeking clarification and further transparency in those tables and reports.
Thank you, Lynn. Sorry, David, you cut across you.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain what the issue is here, Chair. You're referring to 26-27. This report's 25-26, and then there seems to be some problem. I've picked that out. There's some problem with weights tabled.
Huge variation between years. The budget papers in one year, there's a huge variation between that budget paper in one year and the budget paper in the next year for the same when looking at the same financial year. My point was around looking at 25-26 in the previous budget, the schools capital programme was for 26-27 was 55 million. And in this year's budget papers, for the same financial year, 26-27, the budget was 20 million pound less. And it's difficult to track those changes, why those changes have occurred. Because this education budget over the next 5 years is talking about £250 million spend.
Right. Well, we've got a specific query there. Perhaps Marianne can help us with that one.
Marianne, are you still here? Oh,
Yeah,
no,
it's the difference is the profiling. So we profile every year what we expect to be spending, and obviously it's a best guess estimate until the time comes when you're close to construction and you've got a contractor on board and that the programme is far more set in stone. So up until then, the costs of the design work, etc., are fluid. And as I said, profiling every year on an annual basis, then obviously that then reflects as we move into the next stage of the programme. So on a sort of 5-year programme, you'd probably see how it all fluctuates a bit better than when you're just seeing like on a year-by-year basis.
Yes, and I'm comparing the two budget reports, and there's so huge variation, even if it's just 2 years out or on 1 year. So it does. And how my question is, I want to track those changes. Is there a way you can deliver a report to track those changes and why they're changing?
We can definitely bring a report to this panel, Chair, so with a bit more detail, or to the whichever committee you wish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. It almost needs to be a live report as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting the feeling that this is a moving feast. And as I said, when there's £250 million being spent in the next 5 years on schools alone, we really need to ensure and just make it really difficult for the capital accountants as well when they're borrowing money for the future years, making sure they're borrowing it at the right rates. So it's really complicated. Before I bring you in, Adam, can I bring Jane in, please?
Just to say, we can look at that, but what we don't want to do is be duplicating reports that go to one committee or another. Yeah. So it's in terms of that scrutiny role. I get exactly what you're asking for. You know, we set a capital budget each year. All the detail is in the budget papers of what has actually been approved. But what you're saying is you'd like to see something that shows then how we've moved from that position in a little bit more detail. But let us take it away. I don't want to commit until we've looked at it and we're clear as to where that scrutiny needs to happen, so that we make sure we get it to the right committee when we give that information, really.
I'm happy if it goes to governance and audit, and we have it just for information, whichever way around suits best. So no problem with that. Thank you, Jane. Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Can I take us back to the capital receipts and paragraph 5.1? I think, David, you touched on this in your introduction. We're recording here a total of 1.52 million of capital receipts, and I had a question and then an assumption with another question. So my original question is, my recollection is, well, the question is, how does this relate to the original budget target? My understanding is we had a broad target of somewhere in the region of £10 million in the original budget for the year, and we've achieved 1.52. So it's just, in elsewhere in the papers, we've given both figures of planned and anticipated budgets, and then actual. So the actual is 1.52. That's one question. My assumption is then that whilst the actual capital spend for the year was much lower, but we're carrying that forward, my assumption is that that lower capital receipts has resulted in net borrowing staying higher than we would have planned. And that's my question that follows on that. What has been the extra revenue cost of financing this additional borrowing? So by not selling capital receipts as planned, we are retaining more borrowing. And what does that cost us revenue-wise? Because there's an implication of not selling assets. And if I may, there's a little supplementary one that popped in just then, David, as you explained how farm estate sales work. If going forward, property services receives a percentage of the net savings on servicing that debt, so as a property gets sold, what proportion is that? I've not seen in the Farm Estate Advisory Group any reference to the formula behind that. So I just wondered if you could reveal the formula behind that.
Right. The first thing to say is the £10 million was never a budgeted figure. It was an arbitrary target. So it basically, it was just pulled out of the air. It didn't represent any budget, so that wouldn't have any direct impact on capital planning. As far as the impact on any potential borrowing costs are concerned, obviously, the higher the capital receipts we can acquire, then that's obviously going to reduce the actual borrowing costs. It goes without saying. But at the end of the day, there's a limit to what assets we can acquire and sell, and at the moment, they're not really developing as they should. I think £60,000 coming from an asset sale would sort of do away with borrowing costs for about £1 million. But the important point I'm trying to make is that £10 million was never a budgeted target. It was an arbitrary target, and that's what we felt at that time when we first started discussing that was achievable. With the changes that have come about since then, it's fairly obvious that is not achievable at the moment, and that's been reflected in the figures you've seen coming through as capital receipts.
Adam.
Well, I said that maybe to reveal somewhere in how we report this, there's this live link, isn't there, between we have an ambitious capital spend program, and for all the assets that we don't sell, we incur borrowing around the grants that we get, in addition to the grants we get, and that piles on revenue costs. So I think, as a recommendation, I think all about that little circularity between the capital spend, the capital receipts, and the long-term borrowing needs to be made more visible as we look at both of these documents.
I got to say, the Jane Thomas and Mary make that point really, really clear in all reports, because, for example, they say when something is not sold, you are foregoing a revenue saving of, as David explained, 50, 60,000 pounds per million, and the same with borrowing as well. And that's why the capital program is so integral to the revenue reports as well.
Yeah,
Sorry,
can I just say
David,
that as far as budgeting is concerned for the capital program and any impact capital receipts can have on borrowing costs, obviously we can budget on any capital receipts that we already have, but we can't budget on what we're hoping to have in the future.
No.
But at the end of the day, let's move away from that £10 million figure, because that was not a budgeted figure. It is what we thought we might be able to achieve, and it was pretty arbitrary.
And it's important to stress that it's important to get best value as well, and not to sell at all costs, because you've got a target to sell. It's about getting that best value and making that business case around each individual financial decision. So I'm in total agreement with you there, David. Just quick point back to around the detail. One of the big problems with the capital program is the lack of detail of future projects as well. I know there's a resistance to put much detail into future programs, but I think it's really important to understand the various projects rather than lumping them all in 21st century school. I know there'll be resistance there, but I really do think it's important to have that detail of the various projects. Any other questions on capital? I'm glad we're progressing with the house building. It's really important. I wish we did have the flexibility of being able to sell council houses and reinvesting that money in building new ones, but legislation stops that. Any other questions on, Gareth, you had a question from memory on, I can't remember what it was, Gareth. You're on mute.
I can't recall it now.
I've got it here in my paper somewhere. I might find it in a moment. Oh, it was about grant funding, wasn't it? Did grant funding represent a genuine reduction in council's financial burden, or whether it was being used to offset project costs, pressures, and overruns? I basically asked you a question, Gareth.
Yeah,
David. I don't know if you want to add to that before I turn to David.
Yeah, I from the discussions we've had this afternoon, I've been thinking more generally about this heading grants, and it would be good to get a classification of grants, because, for example, with the capital program and schools, the council doesn't go ahead until it's had confirmation through the 5-case business model that the grant will be forthcoming from the Welsh Government. And the problem is when is the delays because of design, appointing contractors, but that's compounded by the fact that the Welsh Government seems to release the money late in the financial year. So there's a knock-on effect on the profiling then. But there's another distinction that I wasn't really aware of, is that the council bids for grants competitively, I should assume, between budgetary periods. That 900,000 looked like it was something that the council put a good case and they got the money for that computing system. And so you get some grants that are windfalls. But in the other extreme, if you've got a cost overrun on a school, how do you make up for any if it goes beyond the total of the borrowings and the grant from the Welsh Government? So I think a bit more definition around grants.
I think with a specific question around the way we're managing the grants relating to schools, perhaps Marianne could give us more detail around that. With regard to windfall grants, well, I suppose they're welcome at any time, aren't they?
Exactly.
And we don't actually go out and deliberately use them to offset any potential impact that might have hit a budget. But at the end of the day, they'd be welcome. And, I suppose looking forward to the future, if suddenly we're going to find ourselves facing inflationary costs of 4 to 4.5%, say 4% by the year end, and we currently, that's a 1.2% increase in inflation, which is significant to say the least, then any grants coming in, whether it be through some sort of Barnett consequential or whatever, is going to be welcome. But I don't think we're not going out there deliberately and saying that, this grant's coming along so we can use this to sort of negate any potential impact. Yeah.
I'm saying it the other way around, David, is that the council is very constructive in the way it goes out to maximise the grants, particularly.
Yeah.
The very first point you made about the budget is very flexible. It's only fixed on the first day of the financial year.
Yeah.
And it's the recognition that some of these things come in between the budget, within the budgetary year.
Yeah. That's right. And they're very welcome. But
exactly.
I suppose at the end of the day, you even got to look at the Welsh Government's budget, and that's impacted in exactly the same way. They don't know what they're going to get, say, in September when they set their budget earlier in the year.
Yeah, I'll bring Marianne in on this point of cost overruns because I know she really enjoys this subject. But the problem with grants is you've almost got to have shovel-ready projects because they want the money spent almost before you've done it, and it does make it more difficult to have that longer-term vision. And sometimes you have money coming in the last month of the financial year, and you've got to spend it before the end of the financial year, which is absolute nonsense. But it does. That's what Jane and Maria paid for. Marianne.
Yeah, I'll come in. Capital grants for schools. So the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, the main programme, 21st Century Schools, that's much easier to manage and plan for and prepare for because it's on a longer term basis and a different approval process, which is great. This year we've had 3 lots of Welsh Government capital grants. We've had an ALN capital grant of around 800,000, which is only for this year. So the ALN capital grant comes in every year, but has to be spent by the end of March, and we cannot roll it over. We've tried and we can't. We've had about something similar, 800,000 for community focused schools grant, and again there's a whole range of projects within that. And then there's a Welsh Medium capital grant, which we put in an application and hopefully we'll hear. But again, it's July, we haven't heard anything yet, and it makes the forward planning really difficult. But what we are doing, shovel ready was mentioned. What we are doing is if we know these grants are coming, and the thing is we don't know whether they're coming, but we can make a best guess that we will get funding for ALN given the Welsh Government's priorities. We will get funding for early years, that's another capital grant. We will get funding for childcare. We'll get funding for Welsh Medium. So what we need to do is we need to be preparing now for next year's allocation when it comes through so that we can go quickly. The other frustrating bit is we get notifications probably around February to March of these grants coming. And then we need to submit back to Welsh Government, and then Welsh Government this year in particular have taken a long time to confirm our allocations and our projects, which again we're into July, we're nearly into August. That's nearly half the year gone. So there's a lot of learning to be done with all these little bitty capital grants, which are really important. They do make that forward planning more challenging, but we are learning our lessons and preparing now for the next round.
Thank you, Marianne. It's a real challenge. Gareth, did you want a quick comment?
No, that's fine. No, that explains a lot.
And it is really difficult for officers to deal with this. can I just ask, all those little grants you mentioned, well, not so little grants, are they 100% grants, or are they expecting
No.
a contribution from?
All these little ones, as you say, they're 100% grant funding, which is great. The other factor as well, I think, and it's something that we really need to get better at as a council, is we've already got a major improvements programme that's funded through the council's capital programme. And then that's subsidised then by these grants that come in if they're eligible for, and terms and conditions are aligned. But what I think we sometimes need to do in the council is to take stock, because there's a massive amount of projects happening across our schools estate. The contractor base out there are squeezed at the moment. So we're tendering for projects. We're not getting enough tenders back because contractors are busy, and they're busy at this time of year in particular, aren't they? And also in terms of school projects, we're also constrained very much to works in the summer holidays and holiday periods to carry out things safely. So it is a challenging picture, but I do think, again, that taking stock of what can we actually deliver is really important, rather than trying to deliver everything at once, because there's massive pressure on everybody inside and outside the council with that. Again, something I'm looking into. Yeah.
Diolch Marian, diolch am gyd o gwaith tonight. So, diolch Marian. Thank you. If there's any other points from the panel before we wrap up, just a quick point on recommendations. It's just about that better transparency and keeping both governance and audit and our panel up to speed on development within that. Any other recommendations coming out of this panel this afternoon on the capital aspect, on the capital outturn report for 25-26? Ever since I've been a councillor, we've always talked about better profiling of the capital programme. It never happens. It's always it just shows the difficulty of that task. So, diolch fawr, thank you to the finance team and the various officers, especially in the high spending education team, who are racking up the council's borrowing extremely quick. Diolch fawr, Marian. Any other comments before we move to the last item on the agenda, which is the forward work programme? No. Diolch fawr, swyddogion, diolch pawb. Right, the last item on the agenda is coming up slowly, forward work programme. We've had a couple of issues raised during the panel about is that in the September programme? Yes, it is. An end of year transformation portfolio report. So that's good. Thank you, David. Looking forward to seeing that.
Can I just say, Chair, that to do that, it's going to be a very, very detailed report. So you might want to allow a significant amount of time to actually discuss that in detail.
Yeah, I do remember it last year.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount of information, and there's a lot of information today, and we don't really do justice to these reports. Once again, thank you for the officers for preparing all this information. Diolch fawr iawn, and running such a tight financial ship. So thanks to Jane and Marian and their team for doing that. Right, that's all on the agenda. I've got you in 20 little boxes on my screen. I'll let you go out and have some fresh air. Diolch pawb. Enjoy your summer.
Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr.